Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of A Timeout. Over the last 3 weeks, I've been sharing with you guys some tips on how to walk in your purpose. And as a caption to that, I felt what better way to help you insulate and encapsulate what I've been trying to share with you than to invite a guest on who I believe and wholeheartedly walks out and lives his purpose. So today I'm excited to have joining me on today's Timeout a good friend of mine, a man I admire, Brother Salih Rowe. Brother Salih, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure and an absolute honor to be here with you, Tony. And I have to reciprocate. Well, not have to, but I have no choice in reciprocating those sentiments, brother. From the time we met and started playing basketball together, it became more than basketball. It was a brotherhood, a bond that we carried for some years and had a lot of great success, not just on the court in the field of play, but as we now see so many years later, that bond has remained, and I'm absolutely honored and privileged to call you my brother.
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. So, Salih, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Are you originally from Boston? Did you grow up in Boston? And then I know you're a former athlete, so I want to hear a little bit about your college experience and where you went to school and played ball at and all that. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, sir. So, native of Roxbury, both my parents. My mother from Detroit, D-Town. They came, my father from Greensboro, Goldsboro, North Carolina. Both met here in the mid to late 60s. Both heavily involved in what people call the civil rights movement. Both members of the Nation of Islam, both high-ranking members in the Nation of Islam. Both very active in the tapestry and the complexion here in Boston, social complexion here in Boston toward Black liberation. When people find out what I do, Tony, they are not surprised. People who know me, who know my parents, they see myself as an extension of their work, and that's really how we were raised. That's not by accident. And I intend to do the same thing. So yeah, Tony, here in Roxbury, grew up, went to, I'll just skip ahead, went to Boston Technical High School. Then I transferred to Snowden International High School, graduated from there, was recruited for basketball by a couple of schools, but I was intent on going to a HBCU. So I had a couple of trips down to Morris Brown and some other schools, but I ended up picking a school that did not recruit me at all in St. Paul's College due to a good friend of mine going there. I went and, I had some success there, but really as in terms of my maturity level as a man, really wasn't ready yet. Learned a lot of great things, a lot of great lessons, life lessons. Came home, took a little bit of time off, helped out my mother, and then I joined our good brother and friend, Coach Charlie Titus, over at University of Massachusetts at Boston, where I went on to have a decent year in my mind, but in their estimation, I was worthy of Little League's Rookie of the Year. Again, we had a decent year the year I was there. But then after that, Tony, I decided to go pro in a sense and join the Boston Fire Department, which I did.
All right. So, you mentioned your parents earlier, Salih, and, we always hear about the concept and the influence of parents. So tell us more about the impact your parents had on you and people in the community on the person you've become today. What impact do you have on the man you've become today?
First and foremost, Tony, my parents were adamant. In talking to my mother and I were closer than my father and I. She and I became friends after a while. I would say by my early 20s. I remember the conversation, Tony. She would give me advice, and then I started to kind of move away from being someone who she could dictate to. And we had that conversation. I said, Mom, you can't dictate things in my life anymore. You can suggest them, and it's up to me to take the advice or take the counsel or not. And this was the first time, Tony, where I felt like she and I had an adult conversation. She accepted it. My mother, one, is a woman, two, is a Gemini, three, is from Detroit. So, those aren't good bedfellows when you're trying to convince somebody or something, bro.
Right.
So, no, but this was the first time where she, like, looked me in my eyes, bro, and just said, you know what? You have a point. And we sat down and we talked about how our relationship evolved. And from that point, she and I became closer as people. And but she told me about her relationship with my father, and their getting to know each other, how they agreed that in their marriage, the one thing that they were going to do was teach their children the knowledge of themselves, as in terms of their history, teach them to love being Black, teach them to have a stake in the trajectory of our people. For whatever reason, Tony, my brothers and I, not to demean how they taught those lessons, but I feel like I have personified them to another level, and I can't really explain why. It's just something that I feel connected to. No, that's not true, Tony. I know why it is, and it's because of my loyalty to them and to the other people in my life who have invested in me, and I wanted to pay homage to them.
Right.
Like we mentioned, people like Charlie Titus, people like Dr. Joseph Warren from Northeastern University, people like Alfreda Harris, people like Jimmy Myers, who have, again, taken a shine to me for whatever reasons. And I feel like I would be remiss. In fact, I would be insulting to them if I didn't repay them by investing in my people. So that's one of the main things. So my parents, number one, and then other factors in my life who I feel like I owe them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I want to go along and building off what you just talked about, Salih. See, I know you as a man of strong principles and convictions. And I know that you're willing to risk everything, personal gain, professional career, for what you believe in.
Yes,
so
sir.
Let's go. Give me your definition of what it means of leadership. What's the definition of leadership? And then I want you to tell me, you just mentioned a couple of names of who are the people that you admire as leaders. You just shared a few just now, but give me your definition of leadership.
Yes, sir.
That plays a role in your life.
A leader, in my definition, Tony, has two major components. Number one, the ability. As you and I who've played sports on a high level, and I have to say that, Tony, we've achieved. We haven't just been there. We've played, we've persevered, we've experienced a certain level of success, both individually and team. That gives us a different perspective on what it takes to reach your goals, right? Because as we've had to sacrifice a little more than some of our teammates or some of the other teams that didn't achieve the level of success that you and I have been privileged to experience. And in that, we've both had to perform in the capacity of a leader. Two things. Leader has the ability. The second thing is the desire to be the leader. Now, if you have the ability, but not the desire, I can't really call you a leader, because in times of adversity, the ones without the ability will be looking for, by default, the one who performs best in that situation, and then will want to emulate or at least follow in that person's either acute or their footsteps in the aggregate, in the long haul. So you have to have both. If you have just the desire and not the ability, which we see all the time, Tony, we see people who want to be the leader, who maybe in their own mind are the leader, but they don't have the capacity to perform to facilitate the results that would lead to success. Whatever endeavor that they're in. So to be a leader, you got to have both the ability to draw people to you by your success in whatever field, and then your desire to say, I want to carry this. I want to be this. LeBron James is one that comes to mind when I think about this. And Tony, I think you know this. I tend to relate a lot of things to sports. Sports is a microcosm of life overall, yes. And that's one of the main reasons why, I believe particularly fathers should do their best to involve their sons in some kind of sports, not to live vicariously through them, but teach them life lessons that they're not going to learn in any other field of endeavor. Right. So, LeBron James comes to mind, one who has outwardly ability, but also the desire that when things get toughest, he turns and tells the ones that are unsure, follow me.
And that's a good example, because, again, when I think about you, Salih, leadership, I agree with everything you just said, but how many leaders are willing to risk all? How many leaders are willing to risk personal financial gain and also put their career on the line for what they truly believe in? And we've seen examples of people who've been appointed leaders. Media has made them leaders, and I know you've been outspoken critics on who the media has identified as leaders, particularly in the Black community. But I think what you just said, sometimes we have that ability, but we don't have that desire to be the leader. We don't want to be in front all the time. And you have to have a combination of both of those, and you have to be willing to sacrifice. And that's easier said than done.
That's facts, bro. So a good analogy, I think, is that when children who look at LeBron James during a game, and I was watching them last night, in fact, and one of the commentators, I think the brother's name is Mark Jones, LeBron made a move and he said, oh, wow, he just easily got to the basket. I'm thinking to myself, Tony, I know your mind works the same way. Who are you to determine whether or not that was easy, Mark Jones? He made it look easy, right? Because of the ungodly God-given talent that LeBron James has. But here's the thing, Tony. We see that when the lights is on and the lights are brightest and it's exhibition time. And I remember, I want to say it was, so I can't remember who told me this, but in working out, they say you don't get better during games. You get better during practice and in individual workouts. You get more comfortable during the games. So all the work that somebody like LeBron James or Kobe Bryant, Jason Tatum, or whoever that one is attracted to, we don't see the hours upon hours of grueling work that they're putting in, that when that moment comes, they're able, the performance is second nature. So yeah, bro, it's about the work that comes before the time to shine. People just want to shine. They don't want to do the work.
And that's so true, because particularly for men, Salih, what you're talking about is the process, right? So men in particular, we get frustrated with the process, right? Look at your court systems, whatever process we have to go through, we tend to get really frustrated with it. We throw our hands up and we end up walking away without getting to the other side of the process, right? We just give up right in the middle, or we just like, I'm not going to finish this through because I'm frustrated with the process. And people don't see the process. They don't see the grind, right? They only see when you come on game days. They don't see the grind behind the scenes. And because you have the ability to make it look easy in whatever endeavor you are, whatever field you are, people think you're not working as hard.
Yes, sir.
Going through that as an athlete myself, some of my teammates would be upset and almost infuriated because they would be sweating like crazy. And I would, barely breaking a sweat, but I could do the drill or whatever it was. And I made it look easy, but they never saw that I was working out in the summertime. I was running on the track, lifting weights. They never saw all those sessions. They only saw the manifestation of what I was doing in the games or practice that made it look like it was easy, knowing that I had to work extra hard because I also had to overcome something like asthma. But they didn't know that.
Woo! Hey, you know what?
And
go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
It's the process, and people sadly don't see the process, and we're quick to criticize when we think people are falling short because we don't understand the process that they've gone through to get to where they are.
Yes, sir. It definitely helps your confidence as well, too, Tony. You spoke about how critical I am of things, and it seems that most times I'm critical of things that the majority of our people are believing in hook, line, and sinker. Now, let me just show you something, Tony. So, this is just an example of what it is, what it takes. So I'm able to do certain things in social media at a time where people are watching and certain subjects come up, and I'm able to speak or express my opinion with a certain level of confidence, which our people are oftentimes taken aback. But that's because, Tony, I'm doing the work. I'm doing the knowledge when they're not, right? So, and this is something that my brother Jamal Crawford and I talk about often. People marvel at and this is something Jimmy Myers and I have talked about too. People marvel at the exhibition of the skill. They marvel at the way a brother like Jamal Crawford is able to recall and contextualize and make his point to the point where whoever he's talking to has no point anymore. But they don't see the hours upon hours of reading and research and grueling while they're out partying. That brother's in his room, building on the next level of knowledge. And the same thing with Jimmy Myers. Jimmy Myers can get on a television show after being absent for 2 years and is able to command the audience because he's constantly reading and rebuilding. And that's one of the things, particularly in my Know Thyself effort for the detoxification, or I would say the detoxification or the educational detox of the young Black boys is something that we stay with. All these things that we're told we can't do or shouldn't do,
right,
and pushed away from. So, no, we attack it head on, brother. Go ahead.
So, let me ask you a last question on being on leadership. Is it more important to be well liked or respected, Salih, in your opinion?
Salih from 20 years ago would have wanted both, but I know this now. The answer is respected, Tony, and I'm flat out, hands down respected. In fact, I take it as when people like me, I feel like I'm not doing my job. I'm not trying to be acerbic, but I know this, Tony. Our people, Black people, and please, when people hear this, I don't want them to think I'm being disrespectful, but I want them to understand that's another thing we have to do, Tony, is when we are attempting to expand our consciousness, we have to suspend emotion because that inhibits us from accepting revelation. Suspend your emotion. We're a dirty people, Tony. This is what I mean. We've accepted dirty practices. We've become an amoral people. We have shunned who we are as a people. We've shunned our nature, which is, in essence, righteous. So, in getting back who we are, we have to get clean again. Now, you look at a washing machine, Tony. There's a long device within the washing machine called the agitator.
Correct.
To get clean, dirty clothes clean, it takes more than just water or detergent or some movement. It takes the agitation that device provides. For us to come back to who we are in our essence, we respond to agitation. We need somebody to needle us and say, and to challenge us into challenging our cognitive dissonance. The time when we just accept things at face value because we've been told to. We've been trained to do that. I represent the other. I represent, hold on, let's wait for a second, folks. Is this what we think it is? Because I've seen some, and this is another a staple of what helps us move forward, is to look at history.
Right.
History is best qualified to reward our research or reward our efforts to solve a problem. So if we see a problem, Tony, that needs, they say nothing's new is under the sun. So if we're here to solve certain problems, and that's why we're here, to solve problems, we need to do nothing more oftentimes than to look at history, because more than likely, Tony, this thing has happened before, and we need to apply a solution similar to that one with a few modifications. So
to a lot of contemporary times, I got you.
Without question, yes, sir. And isn't that what church is about most times? It's about with the Bible in itself. Some people may differ with this, but it's a history book. We're talking about what happened at another time. Yes, it's also a future. It gives you insight into what is to come. But it talks about what has happened already, and then how those problems were solved from a theological perspective.
Great. I want to go into a program, you touched on it a little bit, and that's Know Thyself, but you've made a serious commitment to investing in educating and role modeling acceptable behavior for our young Black boys. What led to this decision, Salih? And, because for years, the prevailing feelings, particularly in urban districts and impoverished communities, the prevailing answer to solve a problem has just build a basketball court or put a football.
Come on.
And in a city like Boston, for instance, we have a lot of community centers on every corner. We have a lot of Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCA. So we have a lot of facilities that are doing great work. Kids are there, going there, being safe. But we haven't seen systematic change to our conditions. So what led to you to start the Know Thyself program? And, and what was the driving force behind that? Was it set up to be a safety net? Because we know in our community, we don't have a lot of safety nets for our young people, particularly young men, where when you go to more affluent communities, they have STEM programs, they have young entrepreneur programs, social investing programs, and investment clubs. Why Know Thyself? What was the reason? What drove that?
Brother, oh, wow. All right. I'll start at the beginning. One of the major influential points in my checkpoints in my life was my involvement in a program called the Good Grooming Class that was run out of the Muhammad's Mosque number 11 in fabulous Uptown Grove Hall here in Roxbury, where the brothers from the nation, it was a non-denominational course. Even though it was being run by the nation, they did not use that opportunity to infuse Nation of Islam doctrine into us. We were talking about more secular issues that affected us all, regardless of our theological perspective. I happened to have been growing up in the Nation of Islam, which got me there. But I, in fact, gained lifelong friendships. My brother, Jaquil Henderson, who is an educator in this community, and I met when we were 13, 14 years old through that Good Grooming Class, and we're brothers to this day. So that's where I think planted the seed, Tony. Also, my father, I have three brothers, would every Sunday, if we weren't doing something else, go to mosque or whatever, he would hold his own, what he called Black Studies, right there in our den, and would sit us down while my mother made breakfast. So this is a behavior that I think was ingrained in me early. You touched on it, Tony. When as I got to be older and coming through sports in this town and all the relationships that I fostered through athletics, and also balancing that with my desire and really my obligation to give back, Tony, I saw that most times that was the vehicle that was used to draw children in, was athletics. Oftentimes I saw this as well, Tony, is that the athletic part overtook the social improvement part. I was also part of a program called the 1,000 Black Men League that was happening at the Shelburne Center, where I mentioned Dr. Joseph Warren, people like Eddie Jenkins, people like Alan Platt, people like Don Patterson, influential Black men, people like, how could I forget him, Al Kennett, who is like a father, uncle to me. People that I love and came to follow in their footsteps as in terms of pressing on the Black manhood. So, Tony, I wanted to be different. I knew that our problems persisted in the Black community and among Black people, and I knew doing the same thing is insanity. Right. Doing the same thing, expecting a different result is insanity. So I wanted to do something different. What I decided to do is flip it. No athletics. No athletics. But what we will do is go exactly, directly, and at the subjects that really imbue our people, which I, among others, classify as the system of racism, white supremacy. And we would do exactly what the schools never taught us to do, and that's go right at these subjects and manhandle them. And that's what we're doing.
Right, and you know, I've sat in some of your classes, and really what you're really sharpening is the critical thinking skills of these young men.
Yes, sir.
Go back to your point earlier, so they don't just buy things at face value. You're asking them to look beyond the veil, dig a little deeper to learn the appreciation of how you play a role in this and how our people have made impacts despite these obstacles in our way.
So let me, yes, sir. This is how that came to be, Tony. When I was around 12 years old, Minister Farrakhan came to the Strand Theater. Even though I knew who he was, this was, I think, my first time being in the same building or room with him. And I was and if you know the Strand Theater, there's a mezzanine and then there's another level. We were on the mezzanine. I remember my mother making us go. We were resistant because we wanted to stay home and watch some TV, some garbage on TV. So when we went and Minister Farrakhan got into his lecture, I was absolutely captivated. Absolutely captivated. I could not take my eyes off of him. He was irresistible to me. Not just what he was saying, but the pure Black manhood that he emitted. Irresistible. I asked my mother on the way home, I said, Mom, how was he able to talk that long without notes? She smiled and said, son, that's the difference in the training, the educational training of children then and children now. They don't teach y'all to think. They don't teach y'all to analyze. They teach y'all to absorb and regurgitate. Nah, that was a wise woman, brother. She was absolutely right. That's exactly what the American educational paradigm does to our children. All they do is teach them to absorb some, don't think about it, don't challenge it, don't analyze it, absorb it, accept it, and then when we test you, put down exactly what we told you, even if it defies logic. No, know thyself, we teach logic. We teach you how to cultivate your logic, how to look at, that's why we we don't shrink away from when the young lions challenge us. We encourage it, Tony. We encourage it. We want them to be black men, future black men who will stand up and say, if they don't feel like something is right, they'll say it. Because another thing, educational paradigm in America is not about education. It's about socialization. It's about, and since the culture in the American educational paradigm is run largely by white women, what happens is that your young black son, your young black lion ends up personifying the behaviors of white women, hence effeminization.
So one of the things, Salih, about the Know Thyself program, I mean, you got young boys of various ages who come and who sit in on the class, and I've again, I've seen the classes myself. You do extensive work on your topics.
Oh, yes, sir.
I can see some of the young boys like you, like any young kid, they don't want to be there. You can see that, like, man, I'm here. My mom dragged me, or my dad brought me here. And when they first come into the program, I see that, but then I see that transformation take place when they realize you're talking about a subject that impacts them on a day-to-day basis. I see that change throughout. And then, it's interesting to come back the following week to see who returns, how the desire has changed to want to be present this time.
Yes, sir. We don't experience a great deal of drop-off, Tony. We know what we're giving them is what they've been looking for their whole life. We know they're not getting it anywhere else. And yes, there's a considerable amount of effort that goes into crafting this subject matter in a way, in a method that will intrigue them and reach certain areas of their consciousness where they will go, I know they're thinking about it when they go home. It also has allowed us, Tony, to pioneer other subject matter that they may not have thought is worthy or is within a kind of a class like this. We go into racism, white supremacy in sports. We go into racism, white supremacy in comic books and comic movies and sci-fi and video games, stuff that I know they're interested in, Tony. So we go into, of course, intergender relationships, how to deal with the black woman, and who is the only woman we're interested in dealing with. How racism, go ahead, brother.
So you meet them right at the level where they can comprehend that and grasp that.
Without question, but it also pushes them to challenge their cognitive dissonance, to say, well, this is what I've always known this to be, but he's saying something else that makes total sense. So now I got to kind of reevaluate. That's what I want them to go away and then come back and get some more answers.
Excellent. So in the last few minutes, Salih, what's the vision of Know Thyself? Is this a program you want to see replicated across the country? What's the vision for that? What's the long-term vision for what you're doing? And if someone who's listening to my show wanted to get in touch with you, say they're a parent, guardian, or they have a young man in their care who they're having challenges with, and they would like to get involved in a Know Thyself program, how can people get in touch with you?
Get in touch with me? They can get in touch with me through social media. I'm on Facebook as my name, Salih Rowe, S-A-L-I-H, last name Rowe, R-O-W-E. And we don't turn nobody away, Tony. That's another thing. Know Thyself is totally free. You've seen how we operate. We feed them. We do giveaways every week, and I don't mean cheap stuff.
I've seen it. I've seen some of the swag you're giving away.
Yeah, bro, we got to keep them swagged out and keep the drip going. Yeah, no, and that's another incentivize. Something we incentivize them to continue to come back. That's another thing, Tony. These boys are giving up this Saturday morning, right? Even though we know, and again in the aggregate, it's not a huge sacrifice. We know other cultures stay in an educational mode 7 days a week. Americans are pretty lazy in that response, particularly when it comes to teaching knowledge of self. They're not getting it anywhere. So, but I know they could be somewhere else. They could be doing what I was doing when I was 16. I was in the gym somewhere on Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings, when I wasn't in good grooming or something like that. But yeah, Tony, my vision for Know Thyself, I would love to do this full time. I would love to do it and see, other branches of it grow to other cities, and it doesn't have to be me, Tony, that does it. In fact,
right.
I'm already looking at the young lions that I'm dealing with, picking my successor, or at least pushing it on them. And that's interesting because certain things were pushed on me when I didn't think I was ready. Miss Harris and people like Sherry Cope would put things in my lap. And the message was, we know you got the tools, sink or swim, bruh. They wouldn't use the term bruh, they use something. But they would say, sink or swim, sir. And that's some of the things that helped me. Coach Bradley, my coach in college, in my first year at St. Paul's, I learned that from him. Hard black man. And he put certain things in my lap that made me a man. It forced me to become a man. And that's what these young lions need. Constant challenges from people like yourself and me.
Well, Brother Salih, I appreciate you spending the time with us on the timeout today, man. Any last closing thoughts before we end the show?
Brother, we are in probably the most critical time for our people ever. And I don't say that in any poetic sense. I'm including the time where we were in chattel slavery. We're experiencing and faced with challenges that not even they were faced with. There's no such thing as toxic black masculinity. I'll say that again. There is no such thing as toxic black masculinity. Don't let these people with ulterior agendas strip us of what has been our greatest asset, our masculinity and our desire to confront and conquer adversity.
Great. Well, brother, thank you. And for the listening audience, again, I want to say thank you to tuning in for today's episode. If you'd like to get in contact with me, you can also find me on many of the social media platforms. I'd love to hear from you on possible topics and how the broadcast is helping you. So until our next time out, be safe, give thanks, and look for opportunities to encourage others. Now get back in the game, and we'll talk to you next week.